The book videos are back. These are 8 books that you need to read that I couldn't put down. And I say this as someone who gets very easily distracted, so the fact that I blew through these books and I couldn't put them down is a great sign. I'm going to try and limit how much I use the term page turner in this video because these were all such frantic reads for me because I just needed to find out what was going to happen next. If you're new to my book videos, I don't give out spoilers in these videos, so I gotta tiptoe around the plot twist, but if I do say so myself, I think my book recommendations are pretty good. I have a Goodreads, I'll link it down below. I've been in a bit of a reading slump lately, but I'm getting back into it. In the last 48 hours, I have read 2 books. So reading Ava is activated. First book, we have The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I am usually not a big mystery genre girl. I do love a suspenseful romance book, but I've never read a fully dedicated mystery book. And that's what this was, and the writing threw me for a loop. A husband leaves his wife with his daughter and leaves her a note, and all it says is protect her. This daughter wants nothing to do with his wife, who is her stepmother, and the book follows along the story of the 2 of them going on this crazy journey to find this missing person. They're trying to put the pieces together of where he might be. There's a lot of sketchy business going on that they find out about. They found out some things about his past that raise big question marks. They uncover a lot of lies and reveal truths that were kept from them. And throughout this book, it's leading you one way, and then it drags you to another. There's no telling what happens next. His wife's flashbacks to the past really help piece a lot of his disappearance together. Things that he said in the past that she didn't think held much value or weight are suddenly all adding up in her head. There's so many plot twists to this book. I believe I read this in the span of maybe 24, 36 hours. This is not the type of book that you read 1 or 2 chapters before you go to bed and call it a day. No, you are sitting down, you are dedicated to finding out what happens. The ending was both satisfying and deeply unsatisfying at the same time. If you've read this, you know what I mean. If you know me, you know that I simply cannot go a book recommendation video without a book or 2 from Colleen Hoover. We're gonna start off with Layla because I have been dying to read this book for so long, mostly because I've heard such great things, and I heard that it was kind of similar vibes to Verity, and Verity is one of my favorite books of all time. Verity has 5,000 stars in my head, and so I had a lot of high expectations when it came to this book because a lot of people were comparing the 2. Is this Verity? No, but it's definitely got some similarities. Verity does remain superior. Verity is also a little more intense. So if you're not looking for a read that will make you feel very unsettled and make your mind hurt, Layla's definitely the better choice. This one's a romance book with a little sprinkle of kind of paranormal activity. Nothing too scary or crazy because I don't mess with those horror type of books. But it's basically about a guy who meets a girl, falls apeshit in love with her, but then there's an unexpected attack from a crazy ex, leaving the girl he's in love with crippled in a lot of ways, physically and mentally. While she's recovering from this attack, he takes her on a little getaway to fix their relationship, but a lot of things aren't as they were. She's acting really strange. She hasn't been herself since the attack. And then it's at this getaway, they have this whole little estate to themselves. He meets a ghost and falls in love. It's so confusing to explain, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but when you read it, it'll make sense. I'm a big Colleen Hoover girl. I loved this book. It's definitely not one of my all-time favorites from her, but definitely one of those reads that you blast through because you want to figure out what the heck is happening. It's a little different. It's a little weird, but I still enjoyed it. Doesn't hold a candle to Verity. Layla's a good one too. I finally got around to reading Regretting You. This has been on my TBR list for so long. It's also signed. I'm sorry. I had to flex that. First of all, I must say, what Colleen does with a lot of her book covers, you realize how much meaning they have after you finish the book, especially with this book. And Ugly Love has a very distinct cover that you understand after you read the book. I would say from the second chapter of this one, I was hooked. There was no putting it down. This book has alternating perspectives from a mother and a daughter who tend to clash a lot. They don't really get along. I personally love when books have different POVs, point of views, from different characters, because I feel like you get to understand each character a little bit more. They both just went through a really unexpected tragedy that absolutely tears them and their family apart. The mother has a love life situation, relationship that's a little taboo. Probably should be off limits, but she falls hard for this guy. Her daughter likes a boy that she's not even allowed to see or supposed to be seeing, but obviously she's seeing him anyway. And as time passes from their shared tragedy, they start to uncover a lot of secrets about the people that have passed away. It gets a little messy. These secrets are shocking, kind of heartbreaking, kind of sad and tragic in a way. They start to discover so many lies that were left behind. This is the kind of book you read in 1 or 2 sittings, depending on how much you like to read. I blew through this book and I really liked the ending. I really enjoyed it. And of course, we've got to talk about Reminders of Him. This is Colleen's newest book. It was released at the beginning of this year. I think this was the first book I read this year. I really liked the story of this book. It's about a young mother who made a pretty big life-changing mistake that resulted in something that's kind of unforgivable in a lot of people's eyes. She's been in prison for 5 years, and when she gets out, she wants to earn a place in her child's life because she has not been a part of her child's life. After spending those 5 years in prison, she returns back to the town where it all went wrong, and in a way, she kind of goes undercover because a lot of people remember who she is and what she did, and she doesn't want her mistake following her around, so she kind of pretends to be someone else. She burned so many bridges and she's trying to rebuild them, trying to prove herself, and along the way, she meets a guy, of course. This is getting really hard to explain without giving spoilers. So, as the romance between her and this guy grows, a lot of risk comes with it. I can't really say much else, but this is definitely one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year, and I liked how this book wasn't super predictable. It felt like a little bit different of a style of romance than her other books. You definitely find yourself rooting for these characters because once again, she knows how to make you feel connected to a character that doesn't even exist in real life, but I don't like to think about that. We need to talk about this series. We have to talk about it. I have never been recommended reading a series more than this one, and I've been seeing so many comments of so many of you telling me you need to read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and I just never thought I'd be into it. I was like, murder mystery, I don't know if that's my jam. So this is a 3-part book series. You've got to read them in order. First, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Second, Good Girl, Bad Blood. And third, As Good as Dead. If I were to rate these books in order of favorites to least favorite, I would say the first one is on top. The last book in the series is second place, and the second book is in third place. But they're all such good reads that definitely are not ones that you take your time reading. No. You've got to uncover the truth. Each story has a bit of a different plot, which I really like, but it kind of all revolves around the same type of central theme. There's a murder type mystery in each book that this teenage girl is trying to solve. What I will say is that the last book does get a little gory at times, which was kind of unexpected because the first 2 books, even though they are murder mysteries, I feel like they weren't uncomfortable or too graphic to read. The last one got graphic kind of out of nowhere. It kind of caught me off guard. Still a good book regardless, just thought I'd give that little warning. If you're going to read these books, you gotta buy them all at once, because what I regretted was only buying one at first, and then after I finished this, I was like frantically waiting for the next book to arrive, and the same for this one. So buy them all at once because you're gonna get addicted to this series. That's how I felt. She's trying to uncover mysteries in each book, and they kind of all intertwine with each other's stories in some ways. I would say even if you're not that big into mystery, definitely give this series a go, just because, again, I'm not really someone who loves mystery, but this kind of changed that for me. I just finished reading The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. He is the author of The Silent Patient. The Silent Patient is one of my all-time, my mind was absolutely messed up reading that. So I was really excited to read this one. However, my expectations weren't super high, just because, I don't know, in a way, I feel like once an author has a hit, like how The Silent Patient was a hit, it's really hard for the other books to kind of live up to that. This was such a suspenseful book. I will say it took a few chapters to get into it, but once I was into it, I was just stuck reading this because I needed to figure out who did it. And this book leads you and points you in all different directions of who. I also thought the ending was a little bit rushed, and when I posted this on my Instagram explaining that I thought the ending kind of felt a little fast, even though it was crazy and the plot twist was crazy. Still a page turner, nonetheless. It is about a woman who is trying to uncover a mass murderer on her niece's college campus. This woman's husband, who was the love of her life, had recently died, and so she makes it a mission to find out who this murderer is. And these are elaborate, planned out, gory murders that are happening on her niece's college campus, and obviously she wants to keep her niece safe. She goes on this wild journey trying to figure out who it is. This book leads you in one direction, and it makes it very clear who it probably is. Everything's a big question mark. There's a lot of Greek mythology weaved into this book, which I really liked and thought was cool. This book actually got me out of my month-long reading slump. I had not read a new book in so long, and this kind of snapped me out of it. So shout out to this book for that. It's not one of my all-time favorites, but still a good read. And now to the book that I read in less than 13 hours. It is a Taylor Jenkins Reid book. She is the author of Malibu Rising, Daisy Jones and the Six, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. All of those books are 5-star reads for me. I love this author so much, and I didn't realize she had other books, so I got her other books, and I just read this one. This is Maybe in Another Life. I have not read a book that's like this before. It's a romance book, but the way it's laid out is so interesting. Let me explain why. The main character in this book, who's a woman, has no direction, no idea what she's doing in her life, and she moves back to Los Angeles after traveling around for a little bit, trying to find her place in the world. She ends up in Los Angeles, where she has a lot of past, a lot of history in. To celebrate her moving back to LA, her best friend plans for them to have a fun night out, meet up with some old friends, and one of those old friends is an old boyfriend who there's definitely still, there's definitely some tension, some spark still there. They're having a fun night out, and it's coming to the end of the night, and the guy, her ex-boyfriend, who still has some sparks with, asks her to stay out with him, to go home with him, and her best friend also gives her the option of going home with her. These two very different options: going home with your best friend who you haven't seen in years, you're like best friend soulmates, or going home with the guy who you dated back in high school, who there's still some flames with. Two very different options here. And this book is an alternating timeline between what happened when she chose each option. And it's kind of a cool parallel because you see how much one decision can change the trajectory of your life, and how much can change just with one small little decision that you made, and it can lead you to such a different place than if you chose the other. They're concurrent storylines, so each chapter flips back and forth between what happened if she said yes to the guy and what happened if she went back home with her best friend. So she's living out the effects of both decisions, and it's crazy how much one small decision of who she was going home with that night, how much it changed her entire life. Each situation that she's living out is so different from each other, and these parallel universes start to branch off into such different storylines. It all wraps up so nicely. Definitely not your average romance read, and especially since I'm someone who always thinks about how things would be different if I made one different decision in the past. This was a trip to read, and in the ending, when everything is wrapping up, you really get to see the differences in her life that happened all based off of that one little decision that she made. I don't hear anyone talking about this. I know it's a little bit of an older read. I think this came out in 2015 and they're not as popular as her other books. So do me a favor, check it out. I think you will really, really like it. And those were my book recs. I think I'm back in my reading era again. I will have the links to all of these books down below so you can check them out if you want to read them. And of course, if you have any book recommendations, I trust you guys because you have never failed me. Definitely leave some of yours down below. There's nothing like the rush of finishing a good book. It also gives you a little bit of a superiority complex. Bye.